Color has a big impact on how our brain sees the world. If we are looking at sea green or lemon yellow, our brain feels a different emotion to each. It's because of the impact color has on the brain, which leads to an impact on our feeling and senses. Color impacts the brain because it can greatly affect our physiology. Since it influences anxiety, pulse, and blood flow, a research showed that one of the reasons why color makes an impact on the senses is due to memory. Memory of colors turned out to be surprising. A recent study examined differences in people recall of words and memory for colors. Results showed that people recall color to a higher degree when people were asked to recall objects versus color memory was significantly greater. Today in this lecture, we are going to explore the color and brain relations. You must have remembered this picture, which we discussed in the lecture of metamerism. When this went viral, people shared a lot of arguments. Some said it was the condition in which you are viewing the photo in. Others said that it depends upon the brightness of your screen, so on and so forth. So, what is the actual reason for the color variation? The real answer is your brain. You saw it as either blue or black or white and gold because your brain decided on one or the other and then wouldn't let it go. This picture gave millions of people an insight into the complex world of color perception and the incredibly lengths your brain goes to in order to make sense of the world around us. The tale of color and our perception of it takes in emotion, culture, language, art, as well as neuroscience. And one group at Harvard Medical School in the US has been at the forefront of the research into this fascinating subject. In this feverish spam that followed the viral image, many color scientists tried to explain this phenomena of seeing different colors of the same dress by different people. A professor of neuroscience explains that when presented with what should be an unambiguous decision, such as the color of a dress, that the brain can get confused. And it all comes down to a daylight. What's happening here is your visual system is looking at this thing and it's trying to discount the chromatic bias of the daylight. So visual system either discount the blue side, in which case they end up seeing white and gold, or discount the gold side, in which case they end up with blue and black. Humans are diurnal animals. It means we are designed to perform activities during daytime. We have evolved to live during the day, and our visual system evolved to see during the day. But light changes dramatically during the day. Think about the striking solid blue of midday compared to the pink tones of the evening. Your brain is constantly compensating for these changes in the natural light conditions, trying to subtract them from everything it sees to figure out the object's real color. In most cases, it does an outstanding job, but sometimes things go a little twisted. He further explained that with the dress, some people's brain decided to try and subtract the blue, and some people's brain decided to subtract gold. And once the choice was made by the brain, it was very difficult to go back, though possible. He says, when I first saw it, I was convinced it was white and gold. But when I showed it to my wife later in the day, it was suddenly blue and black. Magic. That is why it is possible for two people sitting next to each other to see two completely different dresses, one white, one blue, and argue for the rest of the day. Those who look upon color with scientific approach knew this objectively, but those who look upon color critically knew it subjectively. The subjectivity of the color can be highlighted by the statement of a famous French artist, Henri Matisse. He says, "It is only after years of preparation that the young artist should touch color, not color used descriptively. That is, but as a mean of personal expression. A great modern attainment is to have found the secret of expression by color. Color is incredibly expressive and incredibly subjective. For an artist, it has an intangible quality. Now, if you draw a line on your canvas, it will be the same shape now, later, tomorrow, and forever. But make that line red, and suddenly everything changes. The red you put in the canvas will not be the same red once it dries. It will not be the same red in a different light. It will not be the same red if you put a blue next to it. And most importantly, it will not be the same red to everyone else. It is this striking ambiguity in color that Metzer told his young artists to be careful with, which many neuroscientists have spent their academic career trying to understand. We have already learned about the simultaneous contrast, and we know how we perceive certain colors depends upon what other colors are around it. The context. Take a look at the image on the next slide. In the top row, two axes look different colors. The left looks brown while the right looks yellow. But if you put those axes on the same background, you can see they are both the same color. It is the different context that makes our brain perceive them differently. Matsey understood this and would sometimes leave a white spaced border around color that he didn't want blemish by their surroundings. The reason for this problem is unknown, but might have something to do with how the brain is wired to process color. Scientists have found that neurons in the visual areas of brain are more sensitive to red than any other color, then green, and then blue. A very small percentage of cells are tuned to yellow, but it seems that red was the color that always got the biggest response. But what is most interesting is that all the colors we perceive are made up of just the four hues: red, green, yellow, and blue. When colors are presented so close to each other, then brain probably has a difficulty determining exactly what color is what and simply has to make a guess. For designers, this is particularly important. If colors can be incorrectly perceived just by their juxtaposition with each other, with other colors, then you may have to rethink your design. You have to consider what you want your final effect to be and then prepare the design from this ultimate idea. This all might sound scary, but really it shows that perfection can never be completely nailed down. So red always get a big response in the brain. Why could this be? Red has a long history as being the color to be. Throughout the animal kingdom, red is associated with dominance and high hormone level in males. Even in humans, a red face usually means an angry person. It could be that we have evolved to be switched onto the color red, either for social purposes or just the mean to stay alive whenever angry predators are around. Recent research has showed that this color does indeed have an effect on our competitors. It makes them lose. Two different scientific studies have looked at the use of red color shirts and uniform in sports. Both have found that people in red win more than the people in blue. Why? Well, it is thought that the color red influences our mood and emotions, meaning that we cannot but help to see the person in red as the winner and act accordingly. Okay, some of this research is a bit spurious. Maybe red is just easier to see on a football ground than the blue, but the effect of the colors on our emotions certainly isn't. Certain colors are seen as more calming or arousing than others. In 1994, researchers from UCLA looked at the effect of different colors on emotional reactions. They found that there were distinct reactions to the specific colors. Blues and blue-greens were always the most pleasant colors, whereas yellow and yellow-greens the most unpleasant. But green-yellow was the most arousing, whereas purple and red was the least arousing. Interestingly, considering what we have already heard about red, the researchers have found that green-yellow also induced more dominance than red. So, if you want something to pop and stand out, make it red. Because the majority of our visual brain cells are geared to respond to these colors, it automatically stands out from all the rest. But if you want something to be appealing or pleasant, then blue is the way to go. A lot of designers, particularly those involved with advertising and marketing, know this very well. They specially design in order to manipulate emotion, but it is important for all designers to know what effect their art and design is having on their audience. The Himba tribe is a group indigenous to northern Namibia that have been the subject of fascinating study into how language frames our understanding of color. Have a look at the image A and see if you can spot the odd one out. Most people will easily be able to point out the blue square against all the other green squares. But the Himba people have a hard time differentiating the two. Why? Well, it comes down to language. They do not have a separate word for green and blue, as there is in the rest of the world. This seems to have made it far more difficult to tell them apart. If you remember, we have studied this in color naming lecture. Now look at the image B. Spot the odd one out this time. To us, these all are green, but the Himba's color naming system does differentiate between different shades of green, meaning this is an easy test for Himba, and the odd one out is at 2 o'clock. This input of language onto our ability to understand and interpret color is something seen throughout history. In all cultures, the language of color seems to have evolved in the same sequence. We first developed word for black and white, then red, then other colors, and finally blue. It is thought red comes first because it is an earthly color, the color of clay. The ability of language to define color for us doesn't just relate to an age-old civilization. It goes on. The video in the next slide will make it more clear to your understanding.
Our perception of color is not only related to the colors we see, but to the words that we give colors. My name is Gavin Evans, and I'm a lecturer at Birkbeck University, and my book is called The Story of Color, and it's about the culture of color. There are several cultures in the world, including the ancient Greeks, that did not have a word for the color blue. In fact, blue as a separate color in the English language is a relatively relatively recent color. So the Himba tribe in Namibia are one of those cultures where in their language there's no color blue. So for them, blue, as with the ancient Greeks, blue is a variant of green. So when they're shown colors with green and different greens and blue, they find it hard to distinguish between the greens and the blues. Interestingly, when people from England, for example, were shown the same color wheel, they were easily able to distinguish the blue, but then they were shown a version that was given to the Himba people, which had one color, a slightly different shade of green. The Himba people were easily able to discern that, but the English volunteers were not able to distinguish that. So what that suggests is that our perception of color is not only related to the colors we see, but to the words that we give colors. In our language, we have a distinction between light red and dark red. We call light red pink in English. But in Russian, there's two different colors for light blue and dark blue. Now we don't have that. We just call them all blue. And so we would find Russian people might find it easier to distinguish between lighter and darker blues than we would because they're separate colors. Just as we would find it very easy to distinguish between pink and red.
Hey Vsauce, Michael here. This appears blue, this appears yellow, and this appears green. Those of us with normal color vision can probably agree, but that doesn't change the fact that color is an illusion. Color as we know it does not exist in the outside world, beyond us, like gravity or protons do. Instead, color is created inside our heads. Our brains convert a certain range of the electromagnetic spectrum into color. I can measure the wavelength of radiation, but I can't measure or observe the experience of a color inside your mind. So, how do I know that when you and me look at a strawberry, and in my brain, this perception occurs, which I call red, that in your brain, a perception like this doesn't occur, which you have, of course, also learned to call red. We both call it red, we communicate effectively, and walk away, never knowing just how different each of our internal experiences really were. Of course, we already know that not everybody sees color in exactly the same way. One example would be color blindness. But we can diagnose and discuss these differences because people with the conditions fail to see things that most of us can. Conceivably, though, there could be ways of seeing that we use that cause colors to look differently in different people's minds without altering their performances on any tests we could come up with. Of course, if that were the case, wouldn't some people think other colors looked better than others, or that some colors were more complementary of others? Well, yeah, but doesn't that already happen? This matters because it shows how fundamentally, in terms of our perceptions, we are all alone in our minds. Let's say I met an alien from a faraway solar system who, lucky enough, could speak English, but had never and could never feel pain. I could explain to the alien that pain is sent through A delta and C fibers to the spinal cord. The alien could learn every single cell and pathway and process and chemical involved in the feeling of pain. The alien could pass a biology exam about pain and believe that pain to us generally is a bad thing. But no matter how much he learned, the alien would never actually feel pain. Philosophers call these ineffable, raw feelings qualia. And our inability to connect physical phenomenon to these raw feelings, our inability to explain and share our own internal qualia, is known as the explanatory gap. This gap is confronted when describing color to someone who has been blind their entire life. Tommy Edison has never been able to see. He has a YouTube channel where he describes what being blind is like. It's an amazing channel. In one video, he talks about colors and how strange and foreign of a concept it seems to him. Sighted people try to explain, for instance, that red is hot and blue is cold. But to someone who has never seen a single color, that just seems weird. And as he explains, it has never caused him to finally see a color. Some philosophers, like Daniel Dennett, argue that qualia may be private and ineffable simply because of a failure of our own language, not because they are necessarily always going to be impossible to share. There may be an alien race that communicates in a language that causes colors to appear in your brain without your retina having to be involved at all, or without you having to have ever needed to actually see the color yourself. Perhaps even in English, he says, given millions and billions of words used in just the right way, it may be possible to adequately describe a color such that a blind person could see it for the first time. Or you could figure out that once and for all, yes, or no, in fact, you and your friend do not see the same red. But for now, it remains the case that we have no way of knowing if my red is the same as your red. Maybe one day our language will allow us to share and find out. Or maybe it never will. I know it's frustrating to not have an answer, but the mere fact that you guys can ask me about my internal experiences, and the mere fact that I can ask my friends and we can all collectively wonder at the concept of qualia is quite incredible and also quite human. Animals can do all sorts of clever things that we do. They can use tools, problem solve, communicate, cooperate, exhibit curiosity, plan for the future. And although we can't know for sure, many animals certainly act as if they feel emotions, loneliness, fear, joy. Apes have even been taught to use language to talk to us humans. It's a sort of sign language that they've used to do everything from answer questions to express emotion or even produce novel thoughts. Unlike any other animal, these apes are able to understand language and form responses at about the level of a 2.5-year-old human child. But there's something that no signing ape has ever done. No ape has ever asked a question. Joseph Jordania's Who Asked the First Question is a great read on this topic, and it's available for free online. For as long as we have been able to use sign language to communicate with apes, they have never wondered out loud about anything that we might know that they don't. Of course, this does not mean that apes and plenty of other animals aren't curious. They obviously are. But what it suggests is that they lack a theory of mind, an understanding that other people have separate minds, that they have knowledge, access to information that you might not have. Even us humans aren't born with a theory of mind, and there's a famous experiment to test when a human child first develops a theory of mind. It is called the Sally-Ann test. During the test, researchers tell children a story about Sally and Ann. Sally and Ann have a box and a basket in their room. They also happen to have a delicious cookie. Now, Sally takes the cookie and puts it inside the box, and then Sally leaves the room. While Sally is gone, Ann comes over to the box, takes the cookie out, and puts the cookie inside the basket. Now, when Sally comes back, the researchers ask the children, where will Sally look for the cookie? Obviously, Sally will look in the box. That's where she left it. She has no way of knowing what Ann did while she was gone. But until the age of about 4, children will insist that Sally will check the basket, because after all, that's where the cookie is. The child saw Ann move the cookie, so why wouldn't Sally also know? young children fail to realize that Sally's mental representation of the situation, her access to information, can be different than their own. And apes who know sign language but never ask us questions are doing the same thing. They're failing to recognize that other individuals have similar cognitive abilities and can be used as sources of information. So, we are all alone with our perceptions. We are alone in our own minds. We can both agree that chocolate tastes good, but I cannot climb into your consciousness and experience what chocolate tastes like to you. I can never know if my red looks the same as your red, but I can ask. So stay human, stay curious, and let the entire world know that you are. And as always, thanks for watching.
Here is an interesting website named Data Pointed. Displayed a very interesting visualization of a survey regarding color perception in males and females. In this visualization, a dot for each of 2000 most commonly used color names as harvested from 5 million plus sample result of the color survey, sized by relative usage and positioned side by side by average hue and vertically by gender preferences. Women tends to use color name nearer the top and men's toward the bottom, and this dashed line, this represents the 50-50 split. It means that equal usage by both sexes. Near the middle, the huge ovals of the most common colors, green, blue, purple, etc. They cluster slightly below the center line. 57% male uses these names and 43% female on average uses these color names. Both sexes tend to generalize, and men slightly more often than women. Of the top 100 most oftenly used name, lone outlier is this cyan, just further into males territory, preferred by guys over the girls, more than 2 to 1. Whereas men generally stick to the most common name of the colors like pink, red, brown, green, blue, purple. But the women are far more expressive and use far more selective names for the coloring like dusty pink, raspberry, chocolate brown, sage, robin zack blue, dusty blue. It is not necessarily that they see more color, though women, due to their double X chromosomes, do have the ability to be tetrachromates, with the ability to distinguish more color that, than the normal trichromates. But they use more expressive or the more expressions for the colors they do see, more gradation, more complexity. Across the top, witness the graded verbal range of the female or the feminine color differentiation. Women get specified by mixing fruits, animals, spices, flowers, or other such similarities with finely honed modifiers like neon or dusty. What is the result? A vast display of warm, fuzzy color names that seemingly beats anything our Y chromosomes has to offer. These findings by different scientists may be chilling for some artists and designers. If you have spent hours selecting just the right shade of blue for your design, then to suddenly realize that no one else will see that blue in exactly the same way as you see. This could cause hopelessness. But these differences should be embraced. From a purely artistic point of view, it seems that your art and design are fresh and new at every viewing, every individual, in every type of lighting. Whether you are presenting something on a screen, in print, or live, will see a unique piece of art. You can be standing next to someone staring at the same canvas and be having two completely different experiences.